No one in that little town, tucked away in the Red Valley Mountains, deep in the American heartland, ever thought the most looked-down kid around carried an ancient, devastating secret. With worn-out jeans, skin toughened by the dry sun, and a humble stance, he looked like just another curious boy stepping up to watch the fight. But in a matter of seconds, he'd pull off the unthinkable, dropping a true giant, an arrogant Japanese samurai, with a single strike. The makeshift arena sat right in the middle of town, framed by old wooden beams and red brick houses still scarred by time. It was the festival of combat traditions, the day when masters and students showed their martial skills before the whole community and visitors from out of state. The place was electric. Drums pounded, flags whipped in the wind, every eye locked on the ring. On one side stood Hiroshi Tanaka, the samurai, a hulking brute, shaved head, cold, mocking eyes. A master of an ancient martial art, he'd already crushed 3 opponents that morning with cruel ease. His arms looked like tree trunks, his legs like stone pillars, and his ego bigger than Mount Fuji. Ever since setting foot in America, he'd mocked everyone, sneering that Chinese kung fu was nothing but cheap theater. On the other side, almost brushed aside by the announcer, stood a skinny young man with a calm face and an empty gaze, fearless. His name, Daniel Lee. Rumor was he was of Chinese descent, had come after years of solitary training in the California hills, and now lived reclusive in Red Valley. He wore simple clothes, his hands marked with faint scars. He'd never fought in public. The crowd whispered, snickering under their breath. "That kid doesn't even know where he's standing," one muttered. "He's gonna get smashed," another said, pointing at the samurai. And that was the start of the disrespect. Hiroshi stepped forward, pounded his chest, and shouted at Daniel, "Kung Fu! That's not real fighting in Japan. Real men don't fake their blows." The crowd burst out in laughter, boos, more jeers. Daniel didn't flinch, just kept his gaze steady. The samurai spat on the ring floor, flashing a vulgar gesture. The referee hesitated, then gave the signal. And then it happened, all in a single heartbeat. Hiroshi charged with a savage yell, fists ready to crush. But before he could even throw the first punch, Daniel pivoted lightly, shifted his left foot, and struck once with an open palm, landing square between the shoulder and the neck. A sharp crack echoed. The giant flew, literally. Hiroshi was launched like a sandbag, spun midair, and crashed flat on his back. The laughter died instantly. The crowd froze. Some jumped up, confused. Others stepped back instinctively. The samurai lay motionless, dropped with a single strike. A heavy silence smothered the arena. Daniel stepped back, bowed briefly, and with the same calm he had entered, walked away. No arms raised, no smile, no words. From the shadows, a man's eyes widened. Master Howard Bennett had seen that move before. It wasn't Japanese. It wasn't ordinary. It was an ancient technique, a secret from a forgotten branch of Kung Fu barely anyone alive still knew. But what was that strike doing here in Red Valley? Destiny or revenge? The next day, the town buzzed in hushed tones. No one dared say Hiroshi Tanaka's name out loud. The samurai vanished after the fight. Folks whispered his men had dragged him away unconscious. Collarbones snapped, pride shattered. Red Valley was the kind of place time had almost erased. A town clinging to its history, surrounded by canyons and dry fields, like something pulled straight out of an old western. But it held onto one special pride, its martial tradition. Every fall, the Festival of Combat Traditions gathered masters from all over the US and even abroad. It was culture, honor, and, make no mistake, brutal clashes. Martial arts there weren't just sport. They were heritage, respect, lineage. But that year would be remembered for something else entirely. Since Daniel's strike, the whole town walked like on broken glass. What had once been fear of Hiroshi Tanaka turned into embarrassed silence. His makeshift dojo stood abandoned. His followers vanished like dust in the wind. And Daniel? He disappeared too. He never went back to town, didn't stop by a single store, didn't answer to anyone. He just vanished. The one who decided to go looking was Mr. Howard Bennett, a retired Tai Chi master and former professor of Eastern philosophy at the University of Denver. A calm-spoken man, always with a hat on, who had lived in Red Valley for over 20 years. He no longer taught, except to a small group of elderly folks in the town square. But after seeing Daniel's strike, something inside him woke up. That morning, he hiked up the canyon trails. He knew exactly where to look. At the top sat an old wooden house, practically fused into the mountainside. A stone garden carefully kept, and a series of posts scarred with palm marks surrounded the yard. Daniel was there, silent, training alone. The only sound was the wind scraping through dry leaves. Bennett moved closer, watching the boy's fluid movements, spins, controlled breaths, strikes that looked like they belonged to an ancient style he hadn't seen since his youth. Hung Gar mixed with Fajin, he wondered. Daniel stopped mid-motion as if he'd felt the presence. "I knew someone would come. I just didn't know it'd be you," he said without turning. "That strike," Bennett began. You didn't learn it on your own." Daniel simply nodded. The old man stepped forward, eyeing the splintered posts and broken trunks scattered around. Everything screamed of years of relentless training. This wasn't for show. This was discipline forged in solitude. "How long have you trained in that style?" "Since my grandfather passed," Daniel replied. "He was the last master of our lineage, taught me everything in his final days, and made me swear I'd never use it out of vanity." "Then why now?" Daniel drew in a long breath, eyes fixed on the red horizon. "Because the samurai I dropped wasn't the first of his line to mock kung fu." Howard Bennett understood the words left unspoken. The fight at the festival hadn't been just a display. It was a reckoning, maybe even a vengeance stretching across generations. But there was something more. "You know what you've done, boy?" Bennett asked. "That strike you used. It's a secret. Almost no one knows it. But now that it's been seen, others will come, and they won't wait long." Daniel finally met the old master's gaze. "I know, and I'm ready." Down in town, rumors were already spreading. A mysterious man had arrived that morning in a black car with no plates, dressed in silk, wearing gloves despite the heat. He'd visited the ring, taken samples from the dirt, and left without a word. On the local radio, someone mentioned a group of fighters traveling city to city in search of a lost descendant. Red Valley, always a quiet refuge of tradition, was about to become ground zero for something much bigger. That same week, strangers began showing up. They blended in, but not completely. Always in black, always in pairs. Some claimed to be tourists, others collectors of martial arts. But they had one thing in common. They dodged questions, watched too closely, and never mingled with the locals. To ordinary folks, they were invisible. To Howard Bennett, who had seen this kind of thing before, they were a warning sign. They were hunting something or someone. One afternoon, as Bennett taught Tai Chi to his small group in the town square, two of those men appeared. Polite, quiet, but cold. One of them spoke with a thick accent. "Did you know the young man who defeated the samurai?" Bennett raised an eyebrow. "What happened at the festival was unexpected, but I don't get involved with fighters. I'm just retired." "Everyone has a past," the other said, "and some have secrets." They didn't press further, but the message was clear. Daniel's trail had already gone international, and that was bad. Far above, on the mountaintop, Daniel Lee kept training. But something had shifted. Since the fight, his body felt tighter, his mind restless. Every strike against the old wood seemed less like practice and more like holding back something growing inside him, the fear of being watched, and he was. He started noticing strange signs around his house, footprints too light to be animals, branches snapped with precision. One night, he realized a training post had been moved ever so slightly out of place. Someone had been there. That was when Howard returned. He carried an old wooden box and a heavy look. "It's time you understand why your strike was more than just a strike," he said. Inside the box were weathered manuscripts in traditional Chinese, filled with sketches of movements, maps of the human body, and philosophical texts. "This style, Daniel, it's called the Inner Lotus. It's not just a martial art, it's a code, a symbol of resistance against those who once tried to erase the original Kung Fu. Your grandfather didn't teach you to fight, he taught you to protect something." Daniel studied the drawings with reverence. "And now they want to take it from me." Howard nodded. "Not just take, control. The group that's coming. They're known as the Heirs of the Void, a secret order made of ex-fighters, rogue masters, collectors. They don't care about the philosophy, only power. They've stolen styles from Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, and now they want yours." Daniel shut his eyes, feeling the crushing weight of a responsibility he never asked for. "And Hiroshi?" he asked quietly. Howard's face hardened. "You broke his body, but the pride of a man like Hiroshi Tanaka doesn't die that easy. Word is, he was taken by Yakuza fighters, that he's recovering and training. If that's true, he'll come back for you." That night, Daniel dreamed of fire. He saw his grandfather falling under swords, monks fighting in silence against men with guns. His own reflection staring back with eyes he didn't recognize. He woke up drenched in sweat, and outside his door, someone had left something. A black envelope, sealed with red wax. Inside, a single message. "The technique of the Inner Lotus belongs to all. To deny it is to declare war." Below it, a symbol, an incomplete circle, the mark of the Heirs of the Void. The next day, Howard summoned Daniel to a dojo long closed. Dust clung to every surface, but relics remained, wooden weapons, old portraits, medals. Howard bowed silently, sweeping the floor clean. "If you're going to fight, you need to be ready, not with anger, not with pride, with purpose." Daniel said nothing. He simply stepped onto the tatami and drew in a deep breath. Outside, in Red Valley, strange posters began appearing on lampposts. "Secret tournament of lost styles, for true masters only." With a date, a place, and one chilling line, "One way in, no way out." The fight was no longer local. Now it was global. News of the secret tournament of lost styles spread like wildfire through martial arts communities across the United States. Cryptic posters, coded invitations, and rumors only deepened the mystery. Some said only the true guardians of authentic and pure styles would be summoned. Others whispered it was a trap set by the Heirs of the Void, a way to lure surviving masters into one place and steal their secrets by force. Though officially retired, Howard Bennett began receiving messages from old colleagues. One came from Professor Lin Yue, a sinologist and expert in ancient war manuscripts. Lin's coded letter was easy for Howard to decipher. "They don't want the style. They want what lies behind it. The Lotus lineage guards the last map." "Is it with the boy?" Howard burned the letter as soon as he read it. Meanwhile, Daniel Lee trained harder than ever. But this time, he wasn't alone. Among the curious faces that started appearing on the mountain, one young woman returned more than once. Her name was Mia Alvarez, a documentary photographer, granddaughter of a Filipino fighter who once competed in underground tournaments in Vietnam. "I'm documenting stories of forgotten styles," she said, an old camera hanging from her neck. "This place feels like a legend." Daniel, wary at first, eventually allowed her to stay. Mia was observant. She noticed things others ignored. One afternoon, she discovered a notebook belonging to Daniel's grandfather, hidden among the garden stones. Inside were technical notes, a map marked with points across Southeast Asia, and 3 bold red letters. TDL. Mia snapped a photo, but said nothing to Daniel. That night, she sent the image to an anonymous contact with just 3 words. He has the map. Red Valley was changing. Howard's dojo quietly reopened. Local youths drifted closer, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Tyrese, a hometown boxer who had grown up idolizing the festival but was always dismissed as too modern. He approached Daniel. "You dropped a monster with 1 strike. I don't believe in magic. Teach me that." "It's not a strike," Daniel replied. "It's a path." Still, Tyrese kept showing up, training by himself, messing up almost everything, but he didn't quit. Howard noticed. The kid had hunger, and hunger could be dangerous. As the secret tournament drew near, the heirs of the void began moving. Nearby schools were raided, masters vanished, ancestral styles like Wing Chun, Bagwajang, even Krabi Krabong were stolen, with footage of their techniques being sold on the dark web for millions. They weren't just copying. They were cataloging, patenting, controlling. The last school of the Inner Lotus style was in Red Valley, and they knew it. Mia stayed close to Daniel, but the tension grew. One morning, Howard confronted her. "I know you're not just here to take pictures." "Maybe not," she answered, "but he needs someone to help him see beyond the mountain, or someone to betray him when his guard is down." She didn't reply. But that night, she typed another message to her anonymous contact. "He trusts me now, but I'm not sure I can keep this up." The secret tournament was confirmed. It would take place in an abandoned industrial warehouse outside Las Vegas, transformed into an arena. No audience, no press, invite only. Each participant was allowed to bring 1 representative or guardian. Daniel chose Howard, but Howard hesitated. "Maybe you should pick someone who can fight by your side." Daniel's eyes shifted to Therese, who stood in silence, practicing slow movements with his eyes closed. "I already chose who will fight with me," Daniel said. "You just need to show me the way there." As the sun set over Red Valley, a private jet landed 200 miles away. From it stepped a tall man with a shaved head, a scar on his shoulder, and heavy footsteps. Hiroshi Tanaka. He was back, but his eyes were empty. The warehouse outside Las Vegas looked deserted on the outside. Inside, it had been rebuilt into a concrete arena, cold floodlights, hidden cameras, private medics on standby. At the center, a black-painted circle, the Circle of Heritage, where only the true keepers of martial styles were allowed to step. Daniel arrived with Howard and Tyrese. The tension was suffocating. Other fighters were already there. Enigmatic figures from across the globe, some calm and serene, others with predatory stares. No crowd. Just hidden recorders, silent judges, and high-stakes bets in the shadows. At the entrance, one of the judges, an older Asian man with gray hair and a military coat, scanned Daniel's face with a device. "Inner Lotus confirmed." The sound of the gate closing behind them echoed like a death sentence. The first match wasn't Daniel's. An Indonesian silent master faced a Thai woman trained in Waiboran. Every strike was calculated, every step carried decades of history and blood. This wasn't spectacle, it was survival. Everyone knew losing meant you might not walk away. Tyrese watched, wide-eyed. "This isn't a tournament. It's an elegant execution." Howard nodded grimly. "And soon it'll be your turn, kid," he said, glancing at Daniel. When Daniel Lee's name was finally called, silence swept the hall. He walked into the circle with steady steps, his mind centered, his body light. And then the opponent's name was revealed, representing the Nitin Ryu style, Hiroshi Tanaka. The ground seemed to shake. Every head turned. Through a side door, the samurai entered. His face was stone, his silence heavier than words. No sneer, no arrogance, none of the mockery from the festival. But something in his gait was unnatural. Something mechanical. "He's different," Howard muttered. "Way different," Tyrese added. Hiroshi stepped into the circle and did something unthinkable. He bowed, a traditional gesture of respect. Daniel bowed back. The judge raised his hand. "Begin." The first strikes were slow, almost ceremonial. Hiroshi seemed to be testing Daniel's limits, as if memorizing every reaction. Daniel countered calmly, but something felt off. Then Hiroshi threw a strike into the air, not even aimed at Daniel, and the space around him cracked like thunder. Daniel was hurled backward, as if he'd slammed into an invisible wall. The crowd of fighters gasped in shock. Howard shot to his feet. "That's not Nitin Ryu, that's projected energy," a master from Laos cut in. "But that doesn't exist." Daniel struggled to his feet. He locked eyes with Hiroshi, and there he saw it, the void, a dead stare. And then he understood. Hiroshi had been manipulated, reprogrammed maybe, forced into something that twisted the very limits of the body. The heirs of the void weren't just stealing styles, they were fusing and corrupting everything they touched. Hiroshi attacked again, a kick, a punch, a spin. Daniel blocked, but he was clearly at a disadvantage. The samurai was no longer human in the traditional sense. He was a weapon, enhanced, but Daniel had something Hiroshi had lost, a soul. In a rare pause, Daniel rooted his feet to the floor, raised his palm, and channeled what his grandfather had taught him. The inner lotus strike was never about strength. It was intention, an ancient technique aligned with breath, emotion, and timing. When Hiroshi came in for the finishing blow, Daniel pivoted, opened his palm, and struck the exact same point. Between the collarbone and the neck, the same spot, the same strike. But this time, it wasn't the body that broke. It was the control. Hiroshi staggered, dropped to his knees, and whispered words no one expected to hear. "You freed me." Then he collapsed. The arena froze, but in the shadows far from the circle, someone pressed a button on a remote and muttered, "Plan B." Immediately, every door in the warehouse locked with a metallic slam. Red lights flickered on, and from hidden speakers, a voice echoed, "Congratulations, Masters, your styles have been successfully recorded. Now, let's test your techniques under real combat conditions." Side doors burst open. Figures in masks and hoods poured in. This wasn't a tournament anymore. It was an ambush. The sound of locks clanging shut was like a death sentence. The pulsing red lights beat like a heart on the verge of exploding. Fighters who had moments ago been divided by styles and traditions now stood shoulder to shoulder, trapped in a kill box built by the heirs of the void. Daniel, still battered from his fight with Hiroshi, turned to Howard. This was the plan all along. "They wanted every living style gathered here," the old master growled. "This wasn't a tournament. It was a harvest." Mia, who had been watching from the technical stands, bolted toward a side exit, but two masked men blocked her. One recognized her. His hesitation gave her just enough time to slam a kick into his knee and sprint back into the central hall. Daniel caught her eyes, fury blazing. "You knew?" She froze. "I knew they were after you, but I didn't know they'd do this. I thought I could protect you from the inside." "Now we're all inside," Daniel snapped. Tyrese rushed over, sweat pouring, fists raised. "There's more than 20 of them coming in, and they're armed, but not with guns. They fight." Sure enough, the masked figures moved with inhuman synchronicity, like their training had been coded by AI. Their attacks blended schools that should never have mixed, Muay Thai with Tai Chi, Aikido with Capoeira, fused into lethal, unpredictable patterns. Chaos erupted. Legendary masters who had never fought side by side now clashed together just to survive. The Indonesian Silat master fell shielding younger fighters. A jiu-jitsu specialist tried to lock one of the masked men down, only to realize his opponent didn't even feel pain. "They're altered," Howard muttered, "maybe not even fully human." Hiroshi, unconscious, was carried away by a few who still saw him as their leader. But even in that broken body, his ragged breathing suggested another war, one inside himself. Daniel, Mia, Tyrese, and Howard pulled back with a smaller group to the second floor, abandoned office space above the warehouse. They barred the doors and tried to catch their breath. Daniel looked at them all. The inner lotus technique is part of what they're after, but there's more. A code, a map, a secret. They think I have it. V. Howard pulled a torn scrap of paper from his pocket, ripped from the notebook Mia had found in the mountains. This is what they want. Mia's eyes widened. That's a fragment of the map, the same symbol from the Lotus manuscripts. Yes, and it's also a key, Howard said. Daniel glared at him. Why didn't you ever tell me? The old master exhaled heavily. Because I wasn't sure you were ready to carry more than your grandfather's legacy. But now, it's no longer a choice. Before they could argue, explosions shook the floor below. The masked soldiers were coming up. Tyrese clenched his fists. I'm no master, don't know any secret styles, but if I fall here, I'll fall fighting. Daniel looked at him, and for the first time he smiled. You've got something they'll never have. Soul. Downstairs, one of the air's surveillance feeds caught something unexpected. Hiroshi Tanaka was on his feet, alone, in the middle of the main hall, his eyes still low. His stance solid, and without warning he struck, a single pure technique that sent a masked fighter crashing into the wall. What's he doing? Mia whispered. Howard's gaze sharpened. Maybe he's found what he lost. Now, with the group divided, the masked fighters spreading, and secrets of the past erupting into the present, one truth remained. The fight for style had become a fight for freedom, and there would be no room for mercy. On the upper floor of the warehouse, with the sounds of battle echoing below, Daniel Lee stood before a locked metal door, breathing deep. The group needed to escape, but every exit was blocked. The only way out was through the roof, reachable only if they could break the old hydraulic lock on the retractable ladder. No one there had the strength, except him. What are you about to do? Tyrese asked. Something my grandfather forbade me to try before completing the training. Daniel stepped forward, closed his eyes, breathed slowly. He remembered a teaching etched in the old manuscript. The lotus blooms under extreme pressure. When the soul is at peace, the body will follow. He focused all his energy into the base of his palm, rotated his hip, and drove a single strike into the lock's exact weak point. The mechanism snapped. The ladder crashed down with a metallic roar, revealing the way to the rooftop. Mia stared in awe. It wasn't just technique. It was something more. Total control over body and spirit. He's at the edge and beyond, Howard whispered. Down below, Hiroshi Tanaka fought like a man reborn. The fury of mind control was gone. In its place stood a silent, focused warrior. He no longer fought for ego or glory. He fought to rewrite his own story. With sharper, cleaner movements, he cut through the masked fighters, blending traditional Nitan Ryu with modern improvisations. When he looked up at Daniel on the mezzanine, he simply nodded. Thank you, Hiroshi murmured, voiceless but clear. From above, Daniel watched the chaos unfold as if witnessing the end of an era. They won't stop with this tournament. Even if we escape, they'll keep hunting the styles, the masters, the lineages. Howard's gaze locked on his. Then it's time to stop running. Time to do what your grandfather never wanted. Bring the Lotus to the world. Expose the style. Expose the truth. During the rooftop escape, the group split. Daniel, Mia, and Tyrese descended the fire escape. Howard stayed behind with Hiroshi, covering their retreat. On their way down, they stumbled upon one of the heir's own, a thin man, eyes weathered by too many battles, bleeding against the wall. He smiled weakly when he saw Daniel. "You're the last piece. They think they have the map, but they don't have the key." "What key?" The man pressed a flash drive into Daniel's hand, Chinese symbols carved into its casing. "This unlocks what's hidden in the manuscript's words, an entire database of extinct styles. That's what the heirs are truly after." He exhaled his last breath. Outside the warehouse, drones circled overhead. This wasn't a small op. It was a coordinated strike to capture knowledge, dominate tradition, erase the past. But now, Daniel carried something they hadn't counted on. The technique, the code, and the will to fight not for revenge, but for preservation. Days later, hiding in rural Arizona, Daniel stared at the flash drive, too hesitant to open it. "If I show this to the world, the Lotus loses its mystery, but if I hide it, it may vanish forever." Mia, calm beside him, answered, "It's not about hiding or showing. It's about sharing. Wisely." Outside, Tyrese trained relentlessly, weaving Lotus principles into his boxing. "This changes everything," he said, blending flow with impact, technique with purpose. Daniel watched. He knew something new was beginning. Not a school, not a new style, a silent revolution. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, in a dark room atop a skyscraper, a man studied footage of the warehouse battle. He smiled. He escaped. Good. Let him carry the message. And when everyone learns, we'll take it back. The war wasn't over. It had only changed shape. 2 months had passed since the chaos in the Las Vegas warehouse. To the outside world, life spun on as if nothing had happened. But in the shadows, something was spreading, the rebirth of forgotten styles. Daniel Lee, now under a false identity, lived hidden in a restored temple in the Colorado mountains. There, alongside Howard, Mia, and Tyrese, he trained daily, not for spectacle, but to preserve a legacy. Tyrese, once just a curious outsider, now mastered a hybrid of boxing fused with inner Lotus principles. "Never thought precision and control could transform my whole base," he admitted, fists wrapped, eyes sharper than ever. Howard, despite his age, had returned fully to his role as mentor. "You think you're training to fight," he told them, "but you're training to resist." Mia digitized manuscripts, translated fragments, and guarded the flash drive like sacred relic. But Hiroshi Tanaka was the one who drew the most attention. He spent hours in silence, meditating and practicing traditional kata. No longer the arrogant samurai, now a man confronting his own shadow. His words were few, but when he spoke, they carried weight. The mind can be broken, but the soul, if tended, returns to its center. He still bore the scars of the Void Heir's control. But slowly, with Howard's guidance, he remembered who he was and what he stood for. Daniel, in rare moments of rest, sat beside him under the same tree. "You hated me," Daniel said one night. "I hated what I thought you represented," Hiroshi replied. "And by the time I realized I was wrong, it was too late." Both knew the next clash was coming. And this time, there would be no rules, no judges, no emergency exits. One morning, Howard received a package with no sender. Inside was only a burner phone, The moment he switched it on, it rang. A distorted electronic voice said, "The broadcast will begin at 9 p.m. Be ready." At the appointed hour, the device lit up. A live pirate transmission hijacked the screen. On the other side, a man with a white mask spoke directly to the camera. "The heirs of the void survived, and now we've grown. We're no longer hunters. We are the ones who dictate the future of martial arts. Everyone watching knows there's a man who carries a dangerous style, a virus, Daniel Lee." The feed cut to footage from the warehouse fight, the strike, the palm, the impossible fall. "In 7 days, he'll be in New York. We know this. He will be found. And before the eyes of the world, the inner lotus will be extinguished." Silence. The screen went black. Daniel lowered the phone slowly. "They know where I'll be." Mia hesitated. "And you're still going?" "I don't have a choice." "I can't keep running." Howard nodded. "And you won't go alone." The night before the trip, Daniel wrote a letter and left it on the table. The envelope read, "To the next Guardian." "If I don't make it back," he told Mia, "you'll know what to do with this. Coming back isn't optional." "It's not about me," Daniel said. "It's about what has to continue." On the 7th day, as the sun set, Daniel, Hiroshi, Tyrese, Howard and Mia boarded a plane bound for New York. They didn't know where the showdown would be, or how, or against whom, but they knew why. And for the first time, they carried not just a style, but a purpose. New York never sleeps. But that night, one corner of the city was more awake than ever. In an abandoned theater in Brooklyn, surrounded by parked taxis, hidden cameras and silent watchers, a secret audience gathered. Not civilians, but observers, representatives of factions, old clans, investors, even figures from international martial arts councils. The stage was a makeshift tatami under harsh spotlights. No visible crowd, just eyes and cameras recording every angle. From a single lit entrance came Daniel Lee, dressed in white, no symbols, no name, just him and his shadow. Behind him, Tyrese, Mia, Howard and Hiroshi took their place at the side. They couldn't interfere. At the center of the stage stood a man in a black suit, face hidden behind a white mask marked with the heir's symbol. "Welcome, Daniel," the voice said. "The world is watching. Your defeat will be recorded in every language." Daniel stayed silent. The masked man continued. "This fight is no longer about styles. It's about control and freedom. You represent chaos, the unpredictable, the past. I am the next step, the perfect fusion." The unseen judge gave the signal, and hell began. The masked man wasn't ordinary. His style was a flawless hybrid. Taekwondo kicks with karate stance, capoeira evasions into jiu-jitsu finishes. Every move calculated to precision. Daniel started on the back foot. Every strike he threw was read, predicted, counted. "He's memorizing you," Mia whispered, tense, "like you're an equation." But Daniel, tired of being predictable, changed. He stopped answering with logic. He started to feel, flow, rhythm, breath, just as the lotus had taught. The first counterattack was subtle, a light spin, a shift of the hips, an open palm, not with force but with intent. The mask cracked, the hidden audience reacted, the masked fighter recoiled. "That's impossible. You're not repeating patterns." "Exactly," Daniel said for the first time. "The lotus isn't a sequence. It's rebirth. Every single moment." And in that instant, the fight changed. The stage became a whirlwind. Strikes exchanged at impossible speed, lights flickering. The sound of bodies colliding, echoing through the torn curtains of the theater. Howard muttered under his breath, "He's reached the peak. The technique has become instinct, and instinct has become purpose." Tyrese could only stare. This isn't fighting. This is art, living art. But the man in the mask wasn't finished. With a sudden move, he ripped part of his suit open, revealing a device strapped to his chest. Something boosting his strength and speed in real time. "You fight with soul," the masked man said. "I fight with science." He struck brutally. Daniel was hurled across the stage, landing hard near the edge. Mia screamed. Howard moved, but Hiroshi held him back. "He's still breathing." Daniel coughed blood. "The style won't survive if it ends with me." Howard knelt beside him. "Then don't end it. Share it." Daniel's eyes opened. He understood, and he rose. But he didn't step back into the center, not alone. He did the unthinkable. He called out to Tyrese, "Fight with me." Tyrese froze. "You want us to..." "Together, the Lotus is more than one." And for the first time, the stage saw two against one, not out of weakness but evolution. Tyrese with raw power and impact, Daniel with precision and flow. Within minutes, the fusion was seamless. Coordinated attacks, crossed defenses, each filling the other's gaps. The masked man stepped back, for the first time, afraid. "That's not fair." "This isn't competition," Daniel replied. "It's resistance." With one final spin, the two struck in perfect sync. The open palm, the breath of the lotus, straight into the enemy's chest. The mask shattered into fragments. The body collapsed. Silence. Daniel and Tyrese stood, gasping for air. The hidden audience didn't know whether to applaud, run, or steal. Howard stepped forward and raised both their arms. "You didn't just win a fight. You broke the logic of control." Outside, the world kept spinning, but inside the lotus bloomed, and no one would ever forget it. The curtains of that old theater never closed again. The next morning, when authorities arrived, there were no bodies, no trace of the heirs of the void, only shattered wood, cut wires and footprints burned into the floor. But in secret forums, closed networks, and martial communities worldwide, the images were already circulating. Daniel Lee, Tyrese Carter, the synchronized strike. The Lotus reborn in two bodies. The story, once whispered only through masters and forgotten manuscripts, had become debate, videos, studies, and above all, inspiration. Daniel vanished. No interviews, no academy. He knew the real power of the style wasn't in spotlights, but in quiet roots. Howard Bennett returned to Red Valley, reopened the dojo as a community center, teaching not how to fight, but how to breathe, to observe, to preserve. Mia released a documentary with old footage, testimonies, and blurred images. She called it Flowers in Concrete, and never confirmed Daniel's identity. Tyrese became an instructor in public schools in underserved neighborhoods. He wore gloves, but also taught the palm, the stance, that art wasn't about destruction, but creation. And Hiroshi Tanaka, no one knew for sure. Some said he returned to Japan, teaching again. No titles, no arrogance, no ring. Others claimed he wandered forgotten monasteries in the Himalayas, seeking meaning at last. But everyone agreed he was never the same man again. In the years that followed, whispers of the inner lotus resurfaced, not as product, not as spectacle, but as a symbol of balance, of respect, of silent resistance. And every time someone moved with pure intention, with purpose, with precision over strength, it was as if Daniel Lee was there, in every invisible gesture. Years later, in a remote village of Inner Mongolia, a child trained with a man of calm eyes and a scar on his left arm. "Master, where did this movement come from?" the boy asked. The man smiled softly. "From a flower that blooms in concrete." He raised his palm, turned his hip, and executed the strike with effortless grace. Outside, the wind swept across the hills, and on the horizon, something stirred in silence. The lotus never dies. It only waits for the right moment to bloom again. If this story touched you, imagine what else we have in store. Subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters, epic battles, hidden secrets, shocking betrayals, and twists that will take your breath away. Drop your comment. Which martial art would you use if you were in Daniel's place? And of course, share this video with someone who loves stories filled with honor, mystery, and heart. See you in the next fight. The lotus blooms for those who pay attention.